What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So I have not done an updated 2025 NHL mock draft since early November, so I thought it'd be a good time to do the 3.0 of my mock draft. I was probably going to wait until the end of World Juniors to do this, but now that Matthew Schaefer got hurt, Jameshain is pretty solid, but also Porter Martone basically getting benched for Team Canada, got healthy scratch, and even when he plays like 7 minutes a night. I decided let's just do it now. It's been 2 months. I don't think anything's going to massively change unless like Victor Eckland goes insane for Sweden the next couple of games, that anybody's going to be a massive riser. So yeah, we're going to go through it now. Here's the current order. We're going to be in the top 20 this time, then probably the full first round when I do it in another month or two. But yeah, as you can see, there's a couple traded picks. Montreal is getting Calgary's first round pick as of right now, as well as Philadelphia getting Colorado's. And with this is not my personal rankings. This is not going to be my 1 through 20. Definitely my personal rankings affected a little bit, but I'm more so plugging into every single team what I think that they would select, given the circumstances, given what their team needs position-wise. I'm a best player available guy, but to a degree, positions matter a decent amount. But we are going to get into it. Let's not waste any time. And up first, the first overall, I got Jameshain still going first overall, the Chicago Blackhawks. There is a strong argument that maybe they go with the Matthew Schaefer, the defenseman. But granted, they did take Leshinov second overall. And I assume that they're still very high on Artem Leshinov, as well as having guys like Korchinski and Rinzel. It's honestly a toss-up. It is a toss-up right now for me personally, who I think the better prospect is. But I think that Chicago goes with Hagens, considering they have Bedard. But outside of that, in terms of their forwards, they have a large quantity of good forward prospects, but they don't really have any other elite, like high floor kind of guys like a Jameshain. And also maybe you could potentially move Bedard over to wing considering his face-off problems. But yeah, I think Jameshain makes a lot of sense for the Chicago Blackhawks. Having a solid tournament, hasn't really been putting up a ton of offensive points since that first game when he had 4 points. But yeah, he's a prototypical first-line playmaking center. I describe him kind of as like Logan Cooley, but a slightly better shot, if that makes sense. I think he's eventually going to turn into a number one center. And even if you keep Bedard at center, you still have one of the best second-line centers for your future. Chicago gets that second blue chip forward prospect that they badly need with their rebuild. Next up, Matthew Schaefer to the San Jose Sharks. This would be pretty ideal for the San Jose Sharks. They're set at forward when looking at Eckland, Celebrini, Smith, who else? Quinn and Musty. Like, if they had first overall, I think they might honestly go for Schaefer over Hagens, because although Sam Dickinson is also killing it this year, Matthew Schaefer is a much better prospect than Sam Dickinson at this point. And after that, they have like Luca Cagnoni, but not much after that. So they go San Jose, they go Schaefer, and Schaefer is arguably the best defenseman prospect since Rasmus Dahlin. It's him and Owen Power. He probably has a higher floor than an Owen Power, maybe Power at a little bit of higher ceiling. But yeah, you look at what this guy has done the last 4 months. Helsinki Gretzky Cup, tore it up to start this season, dealt with mono, but then had 22 points in 17 games after only having 17 points in 56 games last year. And at World Juniors was basically like Canada's number one defenseman when he was playing, and was great. Had 2 points in 2 games for Canada before he unfortunately broke his collarbone. I'm not worried about a collarbone injury. Maybe if he like blew out his knee severely, that I'd be a little bit injury adverse. Like if it was a Caden Lindstrom back problem, he's going to be perfectly fine. He's going to come back in 2 to 3 months and yet again solidify himself why he's a top 4, probably top 2 prospect in this entire class. Gets a little interesting at third overall, the Nashville Predators. I have them selecting Michael Misa. I think that if they're selecting at third overall still, if they finish as bottom 3 team, it might be time to blow it up. It might be time to completely retool, rebuild, and you take the potential franchise cornerstone center of Michael Misa. He's been awesome this year. Obviously, 2 years ago, debuted amazingly in the OHL, 56 points in 46 or 45 games. Last year, still a very solid 75 points in 67 games. Had a lot to prove coming into this season, and he proved that he's an absolute stud. He has 30 goals, 32 assists, 62 points in 32 games right now. He's probably having a better draft year than a Jameshain, but obviously Hagens last year was far better, so I have him going to the Nashville Predators as they kind of just blow it up. And yeah, Michael Misa is a decent player to start your rebuild with. At fourth overall, I got Porter Martone going to the Buffalo Sabres. Martone was killing it in the CHL like Michael Misa. He had 21 goals, 33 assists, 54 points in 26 games. You thought, is this guy going to play a decent role in the World Juniors and maybe challenge Hagens and Schaefer for that number 1 prospect spot? Hasn't really been the case, and I think he should be playing more than he is playing, but I'm pretty disappointed in his skating ability. He's a worse skater than I thought. Still think he has all the skill tools to turn into a pretty damn good elite first liner, but he might need that elite first line center with him to really reach his full potential. There's some concerns still, without a doubt. Might still be the third prospect in my opinion, but probably the fourth guy right now, and the fourth by a decent margin. It does fall off a little bit after fourth overall, but yeah, I still have Porter Martone going to Buffalo Sabres. Sabres positionally, they would probably love if there was like an elite right-handed defenseman in this draft. They would love to take that. But I think at fourth overall, with that clear top four, Porter Martone is definitely the pick here, even though they have a metric shit ton of young forwards. You go with Porter Martone, he could easily be their second best forward behind Tage Thompson in like 3 to 4 years. Next up at fifth, it starts to get interesting. The New York Rangers select Roger McQueen. And yeah, similar to the Nashville Predators, if they're picking this high, they're probably going to have massive changes this summer. And with Mika Zibanejad and Trocheck both regressing, Zibanejad extremely regressing, I think that they go with the center here. And Roger McQueen is that guy that has all the physical tools. I wish that he didn't get hurt because we've only seen him in 8 games. He has 8 goals in 8 games. But yeah, he has the physical tools. Very underrated playmaker, as well as having a very good shot that I think that he could potentially end up being a franchise #1 center. It's definitely more of a risky pick, but I think that the Rangers, especially Chris Drury, if he's taking this, he needs to take a swing on a guy like Roger McQueen. Detroit, I have Steve Yzerman selecting yet another guy out of the Swedish league. I think he's done it every single season. He's gotten at least one first-round Swedish league player. I have them taking Victor Eckland, who has been amazing this year, basically the biggest riser since September, considering he's playing at the second tier in Sweden, and has been great. 15 points in 24 games. That's far outpacing another Detroit guy last year, Michael Brandstad-Nygaard, that only had 18 points in 41 games. On top of that, the World Juniors has looked very solid, 5 points in 4 games for Team Sweden. Just the overall, I don't want to say he's bust proof, but I can't see this guy not becoming at least a good second liner. He's just a complete package in terms of an offensive playmaker and play driver that I think Detroit would be very smart to pick up a guy like Eckland and him on your second line behind Raymond Larkin and DeBrincat would be very, very impressive. He would without a doubt be their second best young forward under the age of 25 for Detroit. Would be very good value at at 6th overall. My New York Islanders selecting 7th. I got them selecting Caleb Denoie. I think I'm pronouncing that name right. The French-Canadian names always mess me up. But yeah, this guy was a highly regarded prospect, was the first overall pick in the QMJHL draft, and he's lived up to the expectations. 56 points in 60 games last year. This year, a very impressive 21 goals, 27 assists, 48 points in 29 games. Probably the best Q prospect since Alexis Lafreniere in 2020. I'm trying to think of anybody else. No, this guy's legit. Should be a low-end first-line center, high-end second-line center. I'd probably project him at. Maybe not a franchise. I don't think that he has really the tools to become that, but will be a very good player. And especially for my New York Islanders, if we're moving off Brock Nelson, you bring in Denoie to be the eventual second-line center. And hopefully down the line, he really hits and becomes a first-line center. I'd be very happy with that. They'd probably trade the pick, though, for God knows what. 8th, I have the Anaheim Ducks selecting Anton Fondell. Definitely the biggest question mark in this year's draft, because coming into the year, you thought he could maybe challenge for first overall. The production, the tape has still been pretty solid, but the production has not been there. Last year, he had 39 points in 29 Swedish junior games. This year, only 7 in 10, and he's been playing in that second tier, but only has 4 points in 9 games. Again, compare that to Victor Eckland, decently behind him. Still, Fondell is a very good player maker, very high IQ guy, and I think for the Anaheim Ducks, with Zegras being a massive question mark, as well as McTavish kind of falling off a decent amount, especially defensively this year, you definitely have to look at a potential forward. If there was a far better if there was a defenseman on the level of Fondell, I think that you would maybe go defense here, because I still think Carlson's going to be a stud. Troy Terry's very good. Beckett Seneca's looking like a beast, but I think I definitely take Fondell over who I have actually in the next pick in terms of defensemen. I think there is a stark fall off, and I still would be able to bet on the overall body of work from Fondell, especially last year where he was so productive. At 9th, the Seattle Kraken, I have them taking the second defenseman off the board, Jackson Smith. 6'3", very good both ways. This season, 25 points in 33 games. So similarly to a Artem Yakimchuk last year, I could see a team absolutely falling in love with this guy and him potentially going like top 8, top 7, not top 4 level, but I think that Jackson Smith definitely has all the tools to be a really, really good top pair two-way guy. And for Seattle, last year I thought they probably should have went with defensemen, considering there were so many good defensemen, but they went with Berkeley Cadden. I didn't hate that pick. I actually liked Cadden a decent amount, but they got to get some kind of young defenseman on that team. I like Riker Evans, but outside of that, their under 26-year-old defenseman talent is basically non-existent. So go get Jackson Smith and hopefully develop him into a stud that we know that he's capable of. A 10th, the Philadelphia Flyers. I have them going with Logan Hensler. Same thought process here as Seattle. They have more young defensemen, but I think Hensler would probably become the number one guy within their overall core as a defenseman. Hasn't been that impressive this year at Wisconsin, but Wisconsin has been extremely disappointing overall. And yeah, his draft year -1 was very good, and I think that he has looked okay at the World Juniors. So if you're Philadelphia, go get a solid defenseman prospect. Pittsburgh, I had them selecting Malcolm Spence. Very productive last year, 62 points in 66 games in the OHL. This year, taking yet another step, 40 points in 31 games. More of an NHL-ready guy. I think that you leave him in the OHL for one more season, and then he can play in the NHL the next season. And I think for Pittsburgh, it makes sense if they want to have one last run with the Crosby and Malkin, get a guy that will be cheap and will be NHL-ready relatively soon. And he still has a decent ceiling, maybe not as high as some of the other guys I'm going to get to. Probably going to end up being a very good second liner. Very good middle sixer, I'll say at that. But yeah, Malcolm Spence is a very good prospect. Radim Mertka to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Big boy, 6'6", from Czechia. He would basically be their David Juracek replacement, bringing another big boy from Czechia. And yeah, I think that that would make a lot of sense considering they have a guy like Denton Matejchuk. And he's actually been very solid offensively. He's more so known for his defensive capabilities, lockdown in transition, as well as being pretty physical. But right now he has 10 points in 12 games. It's very encouraging if you have him decently high on your draft board. I don't blame you because he has that stature as well as a decent stat production that he didn't really show in Czechia. He's definitely blossoming more so offensively. Next up for Montreal at 13th overall, I got them taking another big body in Lyndon Lackovic, 6'4", already like 200 pounds. Highly productive this season on a pretty dog shit Moose Jaw team after they won the WHL last year. He had 39 points in 68 games. This year, taking that big step as he's in an elevated role, especially after they traded Braden Yeager. 17 goals, 22 assists, 39 points in 31 games. So yes, like a Mertka, he has those physical tools that we thought that he had coming into the season. Now he's really putting together that very good draft year. And as a result, I think Montreal, there's not really any clear, like the one thing that if they're picking within the top 10, I think they probably go with a center. I think Michael Hage could potentially be that eventual second-line center. Kirby Dach hopefully turns it around. But I think at 13th overall, you just go with a guy like Lackovic that's probably going to be a pretty good winger for a long time for your team. And next up for the St. Louis Blues, Keishon Aitchison, a physically imposing defenseman. And I think St. Louis, they have a lot of good young forwards in Jimmy Snuggerud, Dalibor Dvorsky, as well as Dylan Holloway and Kyrou Thomas are still pretty young, but they're still building out that defense core. They got Adam Juracek in the draft. They've offer sheeted Philip Broberg, and getting a guy like Aitchison as that third defenseman, I don't think that he has like the offensive ceiling to become a legit good top pair guy, but just that ideal physical two-way second pair guy that I think would be a very good ad for the St. Louis Blues. The Utah Hockey Club, another defenseman, Cameron Reed. They're all set it forward. They got Simashev, who's more so of a defensive defenseman, so they get a guy in Cameron Reed that is definitely more so offensive. 30 points in 35 games this year. He is an amazing skater, and I really value that when it comes to defensemen, as well as the offensive tools being pretty solid. I think that he could be a solid second pair, second power play, 30 to 40 point guy for the Utah Hockey Club behind Mikhail Sergachev, and I think that would be a solid pick for the Utah Hockey Club. Montreal up yet again. This is the pick from Calgary. I'm going to go with Charlie Trethewey, a right-handed defenseman, and after, I'm not saying that he's better than Reinbacher, but considering Reinbacher missed a year of development, maybe you take a righty here. I think after the Lackovic pick, they're set it forward. They're set on the left side of defense, so you go with, they're setting goal with Fowler and Montembeault, so I think right-handed defenseman, he's a pretty solid pick, not having the most impressive draft year, but was highly regarded coming into the season. And if he turns into, again, like I just described the prior two guys, an okay, good second pair guy at 16th overall from the Sean Monahan trade. You take that all day of the week. Next up for the Ottawa Senators, I have them going a little bit bold in selecting Josh Ravensburger from the WHL, the 6'6" defenseman. And with Ottawa, if they selected here, then they wouldn't have their first in 2026 because of the Evgeny Dadonov not disclosing his no trade clause. We could agree that was too harsh, but that's the reality of the situation. So if you're Ottawa, you got Yakimchuk last year. I think they're kind of set it forward, although it's been a little bit concerning Pinto and Ridley Gregg's development this year. You look at their long-term goalie plan, and they don't really have one right now, considering Mads Sogard kind of has not panned out the last 2 to 3 years. They have another Finnish guy, Levi Muralainen, that it might be like a low-end backup or low-end starter, but I think if you swing for the fences here, you solidify the goalie position, whether it's Ravensburger or another goalie, considering the fact that Ullmark, he's like 31, 32 years old, has a 4-year deal kicking in after that, but your core, it's not like you're all in right now the next 4 years or all that you care about. You do need to prep for the future a decent amount. So locking up that next goalie after Ullmark could be massive for the overall Tim Stützle era in Ottawa. So they go with goalie. I went with Ravensburger just because he has the best physical tools, 6'6", and has been pretty productive in WHL. There's other guys you could throw there, but it wouldn't shock me if the Ottawa Senators said, screw it, let's go get our goalie of the future, because Ullmark, while a short to midterm fix, is not the long-term answer for the Ottawa Senators given his age. For the Boston Bruins, I have them selecting Carter Bear. When looking at them, they need offensive playmakers within their middle six. That is what they're severely lacking. Outside of Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak, that forward core has just gone completely stale. And they took a big swing on Dean Letourneau, and I'm not trying to say that he's not going to pan out, that he's a bust at 25th overall, but he is a longer project, and he only has 2 points in 15 games this year at Boston College. It's a little bit concerning. So they get more of a higher floor kind of guy in Carter Bear that has been extremely productive the last 2 seasons. 57 points last year in 67 games. This year, an absolute monster for Everett. 24 goals, 28 assists, 52 points in just 29 games. He's been point blank one of the best players, one of the best offensive players for sure in the entire CHL. And yeah, I'm not sure he's ever going to have the tools to be a good, very good first liner, but I think in that middle six, he'd be a very good ad for the Boston Bruins. Next up, the Vancouver Canucks, Kurbin Limatov from Russia, 6'4", left-handed defenseman. Very interesting prospect. He's actually been pretty productive in the MHL this year. He has like 19 points in 27 games. So he has some offensive flair, more so known for his defensive game, physical guy, and a potential pair down the line of him and Tom Willander would be very, very intriguing. And I think Vancouver, in terms of the next 5 to 7 years, is pretty set it forward. So as a result, I have them going with a defenseman. And then lastly, Jake O'Brien to Philadelphia at 20th overall, the Colorado pick. Above a point per game last year. I think he was the OHL's Rookie of the Year. I could be wrong on that. But he was awesome last year. This year looks like he's taking yet another step. 48 points in 35 games. Definitely more of a finesse skill guy. He needs to put on some weight. He's only like 170, 175. But yeah, he's a very high IQ guy. I think he can be a very good second-line center for the Philadelphia Flyers. They just need to get that first-line center. And they need to tank one more or another season, like hopefully the rest of the way here. Maybe they can jump into that top 4. But yeah, he is projected to be a pretty good second-line center, and I think Philadelphia would be smart to scoop him up. But yeah, that's the full mock draft. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? Who do you think could potentially fall extremely in the draft? Who can just surge at the end? And I'll be seeing you in the next one.